similar to you, I am seeing a lot of that tracking on the terrorist threat that is brewing around, something in the United States. There's intel that looks like something is being potentially organized. With all of that known, and especially you guys looking into it in more detail every day, what keeps you up at night right now? What are you thinking about?
When this stuff happens, not if, but when it happens, you're going to be either you, because you're ready, you're going to be the one helping others, or you're going to be dependent on someone else who did listen.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the MTNTOUGH Podcast. I am Dustin Defender, for host and CEO, and we are so glad that you are here. Absolutely love seeing you dive into these episodes week after week, and it is our goal to always bring you an inspiring guest that helps you add some mental tools to that mental fitness toolbox so that you can stay dangerous, so that you can live this abundant life. If you are new to the show, I do want to make sure you know that as a MTNTOUGH Podcast listener, you do get an exclusive code that gets you 6 weeks of free training on the MTNTOUGH app. All you need to do is go to MTNTOUGH.com, click Start Free Trial, and enter the code MTNPOD. That's all caps, all one word, MTNPOD. That's going to get you going for 6 weeks with all our physical, mental, spiritual, and nutritional programming. That is the best way to start if you're not currently a subscriber. Shifting gears now to today's episode. On the show today, we have Dr. Shawn Rowland. Dr. Shawn Rowland is the founder of JASE Medical. We had the opportunity to use the JASE Medical product as we traveled to Kyrgyzstan earlier this year on the ibex hunt. A fascinating business, especially when it comes to the MTNTOUGH philosophy of being always ready. We're always ready mentally, physically. We're prepared for anything that might come our way on the mountain or at home. And JASE brings an interesting element to that in how are you prepared medically for yourself and your family. A fascinating discussion as we're going to unpack where these pharmaceuticals are made and how that might cause some long-term problems down the road and how we should be prepared to handle that situation. So please stand by for my conversation with Shawn. Well, I'm glad we were able to connect, man. I know I've been following you guys for a while, and I think the alignment with MTNTOUGH's always ready ethos is really aligned. And we started communicating the always ready philosophy to our community in 2016. So it's been about 9 years. But the thing that's really obvious to me is that things have only got more volatile, kinetic. There's more uncertainty than ever before. Certainly 9 years ago, there was less uncertainty. And compared to 2025, there's a lot more. And there's a lot more things that we need to be thinking about, that we need to be prepared for. And I know that with the work you're doing at JASE, you guys are seeing the same thing. How are you guys talking to your community in 2025 when it comes to preparedness?
Oh, man. You're talking about how things have changed over the last 9 years. I think if you looked at, if you spread that out on a timeline, we're really seeing this acceleration in the last few years, and then it even seems to be compressing, into the last few months. This year has been, it is. I mean, we're sitting here every day on pins and needles, wondering what's going to happen with this trade war, and it's having real effects on families all over the country and all over the world even. So, it's one of those things you probably, I'm sure, can relate to this in our business of trying to get people to kind of wake up and be aware of these changes and the risks that are kind of all around us, that a lot of the times are hidden, maybe unknown. People, when we started, it was, and I think still probably is to a large degree, not common knowledge that 90+% of the pharmaceuticals we consume here in the United States, in one form or another, have ties to China. It's a supply chain that really has it's a single points of failure in this supply chain. It's at high risk.
Wow.
And so we're standing out here trying to get people to realize that. We're seeing all these changes, and it's unfortunately, it's one of those things that, man, we were here 2 years ago talking about this exact thing with a potential trade war, and here we are. So it's just, you guys have that, like you said, it's that always ready mentality. And so, it's always, anytime we get an opportunity to have a platform like this right now on your podcast to spread the word and raise awareness. It's something I feel very passionate about. It runs deep in through our company. It's why we're here. We were the first in kind of this space, and when it comes to emergency preparedness medications. And since we've started, we've seen a lot of people come up and join or compete. But it's one of those things that, might not be best for business, but for the mission of preparedness for everybody, it's good. I like to see it.
Yeah, definitely good to see it expanding and being more talked about, more articulated. And you're so accurate. I mean, there is more to think about than ever before, especially over the last 6 months, and it's only escalating, and it's almost overwhelming. And I think, as our generation now is kind of the disciples of the internet, and there's some pros in that, and then there's certainly some cons. But the pro that leads to a lot of knowledge is our understanding of all these different global conflicts that can affect eventually our day-to-day life. But it also can be a little overwhelming, because you do have the cartel stuff kind of popping off in the United States right now. All of the news is certainly around the trade war currently as we're recording this, which, has the tariffs and them being paused and not paused, but certainly, moving forward with China. And then the uncertainty of a lot of, wars kicking off in different theaters, whether that's the Ukraine conflict, stuff going on in Israel, the threat with the Chinese in Taiwan. There's a lot going on and a lot to wrap your mind around, but that doesn't include the other talking points that we've known for years, whether that's a hurricane, a tsunami, whether that's a flood or a forest fire, happening right in your backyard, and having life-saving medication for your family, your immediate family, yourself, your children, your community. Just having that checkbox on your preparedness list does give you, more peace of mind for sure. You train hard, you shoot often, and when the moment comes, you need to be ready. No excuses. That's why I trust Ammo Squared, because preparation isn't just a mindset, it's a way of life. The world is ever changing, and the need to be prepared has never been more important, no matter who's in the White House. The best time to stock up was yesterday. The second best time is right now, because regretting that you didn't prepare, that's a bad idea. Ammo Squared is America's ammunition reserve, giving you a smarter way to stay stocked. With over 70 calibers to choose from, you set your monthly budget, build your reserve, and forget about ammo shortages ever again. Set it and forget it. Your ammo is stored in a secure, climate-controlled facility until you need it. When it's time, just click and it's on the way. No last-minute scrambling, just reliable on-demand ammo, always ready. And right now, you can get 75 rounds of 9mm completely free when you sign up. It's the perfect way to build your reserve and keep your training ammo stocked. No membership, no hidden fees. Visit the Ammo Squared link in the podcast description today. Your readiness is their mission.
Yeah, you brought up, I love that. I mean, that word overwhelming, it really perfectly encapsulates the sentiment and the feeling that's out there. specifically, I'm thinking about when I started JASE, it was kind of born out of an overwhelming moment of seeing so we started in the middle of COVID. And at that time, as we're talking now, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, feeling overwhelmed with the fact that I was starting a new practice. I'm a family medicine physician, and we're in the middle of COVID. This was before the first winter where I was very worried about COVID and the flu and just a lot of things going on. And that was the moment where it was like, okay, I can sit here and be overwhelmed and just do nothing but worry, or I can do something. I can do something about this. And that is where I got myself prepared when it came to the medications for my practice and my family, and then immediately stopped and said, why can't we do this? Why can't I do this for all of my patients, for my neighbors, for my friends and family, who all have just as much right as I do to their own health care and to be ready. And so that was that feeling of being overwhelmed. I think rather than just be overwhelmed, it's understanding what your options are and taking action. And then you brought up that peace of mind. And I can't tell you how often we get emails, calls through social media of people reaching out and just being so grateful to, it's not, I think we diminish it a little bit when we say, oh, it's just a checkbox and now you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's a huge weight that is lifted off of people's minds when they understand. Well, I'll tell you one quick story. This was back in Utah. One of my daughters suffers from asthma. And I was away out in the mountains, not too far from home, but my wife got a hold of me and let me know that looked like she was starting to have an asthma attack and an exacerbation. So I dropped everything, got as fast as I could to the house. And at the time, I had quite a bit when it comes to, medications and things for medical support. But there was one particular piece of equipment that I needed for her that I didn't have. So I got her loaded in the car. We flew down to the children's hospital, and I remember holding her there in the emergency department while we waited for other people to be seen and helped. And she's she's in the middle of a really scary asthma attack, struggling to breathe. And I felt so helpless at that moment, and I was so upset and frustrated. And I knew that. Basically, I made a promise to myself, like I'm never going to be in this position again. I'm never going to be dependent on a system that may or may not be capable of helping me at any given time.
Yeah.
And that feeling of overwhelming helplessness, I don't want anybody to experience that. Yeah. That's why we're here. I think, we talk about food storage, water storage, or you're going on a trip and you've got to have all these pieces of equipment and things to be prepared. And those are all very important. The medical side of things has always been, I think, a harder box to check, up until we came around. But it's out there now, and you can check that box. You can take back control of powerful tools to help you when you or your loved ones or friends are in need from a medical standpoint. And that's what we're all about.
That is powerful too, because we all are going to have a chance to running in a similar situation to yours if we're not looking out ahead. And Mountain Tough has always been communicating that, because we might have listeners that are, living in cabins 30 minutes from town, or farms and ranches an hour from town. A lot of our listeners are, going on trips all over the world. And that's the reason that we found you guys originally, was we were preparing for our Kyrgyzstan hunt, and we were hunting ibex in Kyrgyzstan. And you know that when you get into those situations, whether it's an hour from town where you live or 30 minutes from town, or if it's you're traveling to, Alaska, South America, Central Asia for these different hunts that a lot of our customers do, your ability to reduce the risk on those overwhelming situations is out there now. And I think that that's a big thing for the Mountain Tough ethos, because our customers, we all want to be as independent as possible, to be able to have personal agency over their own lives to the fullest extent that they can. And, especially as husbands and fathers, your ability to protect the family, provide for the family, regardless if you're at home or traveling on some of these trips. And customers are pretty familiar with that when it comes to, they need to be physically ready. They need to be, mentally ready. And now I think with the conversation that you're opening up here, there is another layer of, what happens if you get one of these serious illnesses on one of these trips, these infections, these bacterias that you're not prepared for. Like for me in Kyrgyzstan, I knew that was going to be a real serious problem. We landed in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, and then we jumped into a Land Cruiser for a 14-hour drive, 14 hours of gravel roads. We got to our base camp. Our base camp was a Connex box base camp, and we were 40 miles from the Chinese border. So the peak separating us from China was 40 miles away. And then from that base camp, we went in on horseback. So we went in about another 20 miles into the backcountry on horses. And we knew that was the situation we were walking into. And we knew that to be well prepared, being that far from any sort of sophisticated medical attention, we had to have a pretty well-rounded kit, a pretty well-rounded medical kit. And that's where you guys came in for us. And it is cool how it gives you that peace of mind. Most of the time you're not going to use some of these things in your kit. We ended up busting into our JASE case several times because of the GI issues that a lot of our group experienced. But that's a big factor, whether you're out on the ranch or on an international trip. I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Use promo code TOUGH for a free Turtlebox hat with the purchase of a Gen 2 speaker. The hat must be added to your cart before entering the promo code TOUGH, TOUGH.
That's a typical story, and not typical in how and not a lot of people go, on those kinds of hunts and are that isolated. But being in a situation where you're dependent on yourself. And one thing I'd say though is, and to all of your listeners, people who are hunters, who are going on these expeditions, maybe waiting until they have one planned to go get their JASE case. I can say, having now been doing this for a while and having sold a lot of these and hearing from our patients and customers with a high degree of confidence that you will use something in your JASE case kit at some point, whether it's while you're on an expedition, whether it's because you're at home and it's the weekend and it's the middle of the night. There's no shortage of reasons. And so I guess what I'm hoping that I can get people to do is just to understand that it's not just when you've got something big planned, or because you're planning for some scenario that you hope will never happen. It's what I've seen now time and again, is really that you might be super healthy, but life happens, and infections, bacterial infections from an infected cut, for example, doesn't really matter how healthy you are. You'll succumb to something like that. So that aspect of even if it's just out of convenience, you like I mentioned, it's maybe you're in a big city, and rather than go and find that 24-hour pharmacy, at 2 a.m, you've got that already in your medicine cabinet.
For sure.
There's no shortage of reasons. And just back to that, everyone buys this hoping that they'll never use it. But it turns out that the vast majority end up using it, usually within that first year. And the good thing is these medications last for quite a while. So if you don't use it that first year, awesome. You've got a number of years left of viability for those cases. So all of this to say, like, now's the time. Like, there's no reason to wait until that big trip comes up or anything like that. And especially in light of everything we've been talking about with all the uncertainty that's around when it comes to supply chains and natural disasters. Those are things we just never know when they'll hit.
Let's get into that a little bit more in detail, especially around the trade war. And that was the first I heard when you spoke of 90% of our pharmaceuticals coming out of China. I did not know that. But with what we're seeing with the tariffs right now, we do know that those are going to really impact China probably more than any other place in the world. So with the work that you guys are doing, how is the trade war and the tariff structure looking like it's going to impact the pharmaceutical industry?
Man, there is a lot of uncertainty here. I can just tell you what we have seen, what we know, and then it's still anyone's guess how this is all going to shake out. But let's start with what I started with as far as our dependency. So the pharmaceutical supply chain world, if you look at say the top 10 manufacturers of generic medications, actually, let's take a further step back. In the United States, we consume of all the things that we consume from a pharmaceutical standpoint, 95-ish% of what we consume every day, we would classify as a generic type medication.
Yeah.
So that's, we can say 100% to make things easier, but virtually all that we consume here is generic. Look at the top 10 producers of generic medications, and you'll see a lot out of India. You'll see one of the big manufacturers out of Tel Aviv. It looks like a pretty varied list. You've got multiple countries on there, Europe, different regions of the world. But it turns out that most of those companies deal in one form or another, typically for their APIs, with companies out of China. So an API is the active pharmaceutical ingredient. It's what makes the drug work. And this data is really hard to track down and find. The FDA doesn't know all of it. There's groups that try and monitor this so we can anticipate when shortages happen and how long they're going to happen for. And this whole industry is really opaque. It's hard to follow these things. One of the things we found out during COVID, for example, was India came out and reported that within their country that they rely over 60% of their medications rely on APIs from China, and so start to piece all this together, and it just looks and appears to bear out that all roads in one form or another lead back to China. So yes, we are highly dependent. Here in the United States, we have virtually no production capacity when it comes to these generic medications. Everything's been shipped overseas over the last about 10 to 20 years. There are no more really generic producing factories that can of any really note here in the United States.
That's
so
wild.
We've got this dependency.
Yeah.
And you mentioned China now, and we always in the past, and even in the beginnings of these talks where we were hearing stuff from the Trump administration saying that pharmaceuticals would be exempt from a lot of these tariffs, and then they came out flat out and said, actually, no, they won't be exempt. And part of that is because we do need to bring production back to the United States. It's a national security issue for our population. And to kind of force that to happen, there's this period that it looks like we're willing to go through, which is to impose these tariffs, encourage this domestication of pharmaceutical production. But in the meantime, where does that leave us?
Yeah.
We've had notices from our wholesalers about price increases in medications. But it's still one of those things that we don't know how high it's going to go. We don't know if it's going to really even hit. It's just so much. And now we're seeing China come back. I just saw this interview the other day from a Chinese government official referring to the United States peasants as peasants and as they better be ready to go through a lot of pain because we've been around for 5,000 years and you guys better believe we're not just going to lay down. So things are heating up. Another thing, I don't want to sidetrack from the tariffs, but we're also maybe in your community, you guys can speak to this, but we have recently come to find out. I've been monitoring things on social media, but this is also now coming internally from some military sources that we're seeing a lot of talk about terrorist attacks here on our mainland, on soft targets in smaller towns in the United States, not just here and there, but widespread. And it sounds like it's almost like a sure thing. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. But back to the tariffs, it's just created a lot of uncertainty. There are plenty of indicators saying that this is real. It's not just negotiating tactic. It's not just a bluff. And on the other hand, it's raising awareness. I'm finally hearing people talk. I've been talking about this for years, and I'm finally hearing people higher up in the administration talking about being aware that we have this vulnerability with our pharmaceuticals. Now, the truth of the matter is, when you're talking about 90% of these medications coming from, it's not just for us.
It's globally.
The world, the global countries in the European Union, all over the world, are also getting these medications out of China. And so we're standing in line with everybody else with our hand out when it comes to this stuff.
One of the keys to maximizing your workout is to make sure that you're eating clean and putting the right fuel in your body. Mountain Tough has preached this since the beginning. You're also seeing a shift right now nationally where we're calling out hidden additives, hidden substances in our food. As a hunter, when you process your own meat, you control everything. No additives, no shortcuts, no compromises. Just clean fuel built for peak performance. My family has been processing our own wild game for years, using field-tested, hardcore processing equipment from the team over at Meat. Meat offers world-class grinders, stuffers, slicers, everything you need to turn your wild game into clean, high-octane fuel. No gimmicks, just high-quality tools that get the job done, and they're backed by a limited lifetime warranty. Take control of your life. Take control of your health. Click the link in the podcast description below to claim your special offer from Meat. and start fueling the right way today.
What I was saying was the truth is we've got this dependency. We don't have a way to fill it anytime soon. It takes years to stand up these these factories to be able to produce antibiotics and other medications. So it's a real risk. And I got to think that China knows this. I got to think that they know they've got this ace up their sleeve because it was a very purposeful thing that they went through over decades long to basically come into the market, undercut the market, the government back in China subsidizing things so that they could take control of this whole process. And now they make the medications for our military that our military uses to treat their soldiers in a situation where it's entirely possible that we could end up in a kinetic war with the people who are giving us our medications. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, I guess all of this just to shake people, wake them up. Like, this is really, you guys, this is the world you live in, but you don't have to just be overwhelmed. There are solutions. Mm-hmm. And this is one aspect, I guess, of the vulnerabilities that we have all over around us that you can actually do something about.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, the dependency on China, especially if they have all the APIs where, these other manufacturing facilities might be making the pill, but they still need the API. If that's being controlled by China, you are right that is an ace up their sleeve with a lot of leverage, a lot of power. And if things are to decline in our relationship with them, that could be a really, really crazy thing if all of a sudden, all those APIs stop getting shipped and supplied. That could create some huge ramifications.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of medications out there that, yes, antibiotics, things that you need in an emergency situation. I mean, they're vital. And then you've got all these medications that people take on a daily basis that they depend on, for life. Someone who's got out of control blood pressure doesn't have their medication for a relatively short period of time, and now they're at risk of having a stroke, a heart attack. These are serious things. You've got, not to mention diabetics and insulin, people with seizure disorders. There's medications out there that, yes, they improve our quality of life. They help optimize your health, and then you've got those that are vital for life. Those are all on the list. They're all on at the same risk. And, we started with antibiotics. We started with those emergency medications because that's something that really applies to everybody. And then as soon as we could, we opened that up to also include those chronic medications that we encourage everybody to have a year's supply of, and we will help you do that. We will get you that full year's supply of whatever your chronic vital medication is. So it's just being aware that there are options out there. There are solutions, and you can take back some of this power and be empowered.
Yeah. Are there conversations with China owning so much of the API side of the active ingredient in pharmaceuticals? Are there conversations ever that form that you've heard or been a part of where there's also the risk factor of potentially what they could put in that could cause harm?
Yes, it's happened before. There's actually historical precedent here. There was actually, and this was a number of years ago, but people were bleeding out and dying in the hospital. And I'll spare you the whole long story, but basically it turned out that this medication called heparin. Heparin is something that I guess you can call it a blood thinner. It's something that we give to keep people's blood from clotting. And it was basically, it had been adulterated and was, 10 to 100 times more potent than it was supposed to be. And they finally were able to track this back into the actual producers of the most important component of heparin, which comes, pig intestines are involved in this process, and it was coming from random farmers in China. It was just, there were no adequate controls, quality controls. Now, in that case, it appears to have just been related to greed, manufacturers trying to make as much as they could, as cheaply as they could. And we were unfortunately reaping the consequences of that. Now, purposeful actions, if that can happen, could it happen in a way that was purposeful? 100% it could. And so that's just one more reason that this needs to be brought domestically. Now, unfortunately, we get this question every once in a while. Well, you guys have talked about all this dependency on China and how bad this could be. And where do you get your medications? Well, we get them from the same place CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, Costco, the rest of the world gets them. And that's, those suppliers I mentioned. And there's just no way to fully extricate yourself from China being involved in your supply chain. Not realistically now, not that anything that's financially feasible. So that's where we find ourselves now. Not a comfortable position to be in.
Yeah, especially like I do agree with the long-term thought process around, what the Trump administration is doing with tariffs. I like that idea. I like that concept of what can we do to incentivize and encourage people to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. I think that's what we all want. We want that the middle class to be restored in the United States, the middle class to be fruitful and thrive. And for that to happen, a lot of this manufacturing does need to come back home. But that, I am aware, is a long-term plan, and there's going to be some extreme short-term pain to get to that plan.
Yeah.
And when you connect that to pharmaceuticals, we're not gonna spin up these API manufacturing plants overnight. That's going to take quite a bit of time. Yep,
absolutely. And we can bridge that gap. That's 100% why we exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I just say, I guess I'm always coming back to reminding people that we're educating people about the risks. This is all about the risks that you are at, whether it's a supply chain risk, a natural disaster, or just a risk from being out, away from being able to access healthcare. Educating people about all these risks, and then just always reminding them that there is a solution. We've made it as quick, as easy, as you mentioned, as painless, and as affordable as possible. And there's really is no reason not to take advantage of it.
Hey guys, I did want to interrupt for a quick minute right here and let you know about some supplements I've been taking. I did shy away from supplements for a long time. I was always cautious about what they were made out of, where they were from, and who the team was behind the brands. But over the last couple of years, I've got to meet the team at Mountain Ops from top to bottom, and they are an amazing group of humans. I've got to know the CEO, Trevor Farnes, really well, and he is a mission-focused individual that cares about humans living a better quality of life so that they can have that abundant life. So over the last couple of years, he has helped me add some things that have changed the game for me. One of those things that I've added is creatine from Mountain Ops. It helps me maintain some muscle mass, but also it's a big player in cognitive function, one of the most researched supplements out there. Also, I've added reds, greens, and protein, all from Mountain Ops. What I found as a busy professional, always on the run, I do eat a whole foods diet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but on the go, it's hard to get enough vegetables, fruits, and protein. So I've added that from Mountain Ops, and it has significantly changed the game. I can feel it in my performance. I haven't got sick for a long time, and I can certainly feel it in my mental clarity as well. The last thing I've added is the Mountain Tough Hydrate product for the backcountry, for hunting season. When I'm in the hills, I do run short on those electrolytes. We even have a Mountain Tough flavor, the Mountain Tough Lemon Lime Hydrate, and that is a game changer for hydration in the backcountry. So I keep it really simple. That is all I've added to my protocol, and it has certainly helped me, and I certainly believe in the team and the culture behind Mountain Ops. They have started an initiative that's been around for a while called Conquer Hunger. Conquer Hunger is giving meals to hungry kids that aren't getting enough food, and they've given out over 6 million meals plus to kids through their Conquer Hunger initiative. So every order that happens at Mountain Ops, a percentage of that order goes to Conquer Hunger. So certainly an incredible company, an incredible culture. As a listener to the show, you do get an exclusive offer to Mountain Ops, so make sure you check that out. The offer is incredible as a first-time purchase at mountainops.com. So build your order if it's your first time. They are offering you a 20% exclusive discount. All you need to do is enter the promo code MOUNTAINTOUGH, all one word, all caps, for 20% off your first order at mountainops.com. Yeah, for sure. Especially if you want to be, ready for anything that life is going to throw your way. I think having some of these life-saving medications on standby is an easy thing to do for that peace of mind.
Yeah.
So backing up a little bit, you got into this after spending some time as a family physician, correct? Are you still practicing? How long were you a doctor? How did you get into that?
Yeah. So, well, man, as an undergrad, I was doing search and rescue. I was an EMT, doing wilderness medicine. Always enjoyed that aspect of medicine when it came to just emergency care, and couple that with, adrenaline fueled activities. And that carried through into my medical education. Through medical school, I was always drawn to, trauma and that kind of stuff. Ultimately though, as I got married, I had our first child, I was in the middle of medical school and kind of realized quality of life wise, and that actually being involved as a family physician where I could still do urgent and emergency care. I could see a huge wide range of patients from birth, basically cradle to grave, really appealed to me. And so got into family medicine and I was actually I was in residency training prior to COVID, just a little bit prior to COVID, and ended up finishing just as COVID was starting to ramp up. And that's when I was starting my own practice back home to Utah. But prior to that, I had been working in these just a community hospital, could be anywhere USA. I happened to be in New Mexico at the time. And before COVID, we were having regular meetings with the hospital pharmacists, letting us know, that certain medications were in short supply in the hospital stock. And prior to COVID, it was so weird to hear about a shortage of anything, let alone, a vital medication in the top tier healthcare, in the world. How is this possible? So that was the very first, just kind of a little, little red flag, something's going on here. And it just progressively got worse and worse. And then of course, COVID hit and now everything, world's on fire. For me, at the time, I didn't know anything about our medications coming from China. I didn't even know what medications, what they actually cost. And it's not something they teach you in med school. You you get an idea through residency because you're dealing with real patients and with real issues financially. And so you start to become aware of what some of the cheaper, but you don't know what they actually cost. And so finally, when I opened my own medical practice, I went out and made and opened up accounts with medical supply companies, with wholesalers of medication. And for the first time, it was like the curtain got peeled back and I saw that these generic medications are very affordable, that people who have a copay for their insurance, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, whatever you're paying for your copay, you're actually paying for the medications. Insurance isn't chipping in extra to cover the rest. You've paid for it out of pocket, just out of your copay. And so seeing how cheap these medications were, and then understanding the risk we were at as far as their availability, and then experiencing firsthand. I haven't talked much about telemedicine, but prior to COVID, telemedicine was a thing, but it certainly wasn't that widely adopted. The idea of not sitting in front of your doctor, or of a doctor not sitting in front of their patient, as part of that healthcare delivery process, was foreign and maybe uncomfortable to a lot of people. Well, when we shut down our clinics and hospitals and no one was allowed to come in the door, they still needed, I mentioned those medications that were vital for people's survival. They still needed those refills. They still needed to be monitored and checked up on. And so telemedicine took a real leap forward. Regulations were kind of, a lot of them were removed and made it easier for physicians to practice telemedicine and not be worried about getting in trouble for how it was done. And so that helped a lot as well, because it's not just access to medications, it's also access to the healthcare provider that is really important in this process. Yeah. And so for me, now I'm starting this private practice. I see the true cost of medications. I see the risk we're at. There's a means for me to amplify, kind of be a force multiplier, or use a force multiplier in the form of telemedicine, where now me as a community primary care physician, I can now provide services to a much wider audience. And that's ultimately how JASE was born, where, and I said it before, I was fully prepared. I got stocked up for my family, for my practice, with these medications that, all it turns out, were actually quite affordable. But then had a feeling of guilt. I'll tell you, I felt uneasy, like it wasn't fair to have this kind of access, when I knew that my neighbors were at the same risk I was, but they didn't have a solution. My own family didn't have a solution. My siblings, my relatives. And so after a year's worth of looking into all the regulations in every state and how can we do this, because this had never been done, and finally finding a way that we could do it legally, by the book, appropriately from a medical standpoint, and able to send this out to where now we are in all 50 states. We're up in Canada. We're moving internationally. That was kind of the genesis of how we got started.
So awesome. Yeah, because you having the medications but not your siblings or your community, that's a big factor of us taking care of each other. And the stronger your community is, the stronger your town is, the stronger your country is. So you just having that in your own hands isn't as powerful as the multiplying effect which you created. And that's been obvious to me too. I would say I was in that boat where telemedicine until recently is nothing that I was aware of or comfortable with. It was a little bit outside the norm for me, but now it's more common than ever, and it's such an amazing process. So I started experiencing it with MTNTOUGH. We're able to engage with a lot of different companies now that are focusing on like human performance for men. So a lot of the human performance organizations for men reach out and see, how they can work together with MTNTOUGH. So I've gone through some telemedicine with those organizations where it's just so seamless and so efficient, where you work with a great doctor online or on the phone. So a lot of the the human performance ones for men, they're sending me in for blood draws. I'm getting my blood drawn.
Have you can even now do that at home.
Yeah, you can do that at home now.
That you slap it on your arm. It takes your blood. You send it into the lab. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I've gotten so much value out of that, like to go through your blood markers and see your different levels and how that's affecting your performance and how you can make these dietary changes to address certain things. Yep. And so that's really opened my eyes to it. And same experience with working with JASE when we got, ready for Kyrgyzstan. Very, very similar experience where, I worked with one of your online doctors and was able to go through my background and my history and my medical history. And, super efficient. Then, the next day you see your kit shipping out. And I think that's amazing because I think I'm a little bit behind the curve on my experience with that, but now it is more standard for people to go that direction, and the system and the process only gets better and better.
Yeah, it's for a lot of people who maybe not as familiar, you don't understand, or you're maybe a little wary of that process. You've got your doctor who you like dealing with, and the idea of some stranger. But it's different when you've got kind of this end goal in mind. You're not coming to us, and nor are we presenting ourselves to you as, hey, let us be your everything doctor. It's, hey, I'm worried about the supply chain. I'm going on a trip, whatever that reason is. But at the end of it, you know exactly what you want to get out of it, as far as the medications that you're concerned about and interested in. And so we can tailor an encounter specific to that end goal. I don't need to know what your surgical history is. I don't need to know what your family history is. I don't need to know a lot of things when it comes to that, the intake form and all. So instead, it's very purposely driven towards a singular outcome. And so that just streamlines the whole process, where I only have to ask you a handful of questions. If there's something about your history that's unique, maybe you've got some interesting interactions with a medication you're taking, or an allergy that you're not quite sure about, then absolutely, we can find out more information. But that's, 95% of the people don't have those issues. So it's a 5-minute process. We make sure that the safety boxes are checked, and you have that very quick interaction. It's not something you're setting up an appointment for and having to wait for, and nothing like you've ever typically done. Make an appointment, wait 2 weeks to 3 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, to go see your doctor, go to the waiting room, wait for them, then go to the next room, then wait some more, and have an interaction with 5 people in the meantime, from the nurses to the MAs to finally the doctor or PA. It's not that. It's sit at home. It's go to jase.com. It's click on a couple buttons, fill out a form that might take you 5 minutes, have a text or a quick email from a doctor, and then, like you said, get that notification that within 24, maybe 48 hours, your case is on its way, and it shows up at your door a day or two later.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well, so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough Podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. Yeah, it's efficient. And I did love the fact the customization is awesome, where you can put different things in your kit based on who you are, where you're going, and your lifestyle. Like when we did Kyrgyzstan, we knew GI was going to be a big one. And so we were able to go heavier on that. And then, whether it's like the allergies or the EpiPen, the ivermectin, stuff like that, you can really start customizing your kit based on, who's with you, who's in your family, what kind of things are going on. So that was amazing. I did want to circle back a little bit with you on the threats, because the thing that I've noticed with you since being a customer is it is obvious that you guys are kind of tracking different things all over the country and all over the world, whether that's the impact that we're going to see from like the California wildfires. I know that a lot of people were getting blocked off from medications this winter in the South when the snow hit the South. Those whole communities shut down in Alabama, North Carolina. We had the North Carolina issues. And then similar to you, I am seeing a lot of that tracking on the terrorist threat that is brewing around, something in the United States. There's a lot of intel that's not fully vetted yet from the angles that I'm looking at, but there's intel that looks like something is being potentially organized, and hopefully we can stop that before it pops up, and praying that we can stop that before it materializes. And that's the terrorist organizations. We've had a lot of guests on these podcasts that have talked about the sleeper cells inside of the United States. We talked to Chris Clem, who was border security director for 27 years, and he arrested people from 197 different countries crossing the southern border. And so, the threat matrix is high, and the threat matrix is complicated. With all of that known, and especially you guys looking into it in more detail every day, kind of what keeps you up at night right now? What are you thinking about from your family's perspective?
Well, you mentioned, and we do make a real effort to. It might even just be a weather update for a particular region of the country. Like, hey, this is coming. This is projected to be, bad enough to kind of raise the red flag for us, and because, for most people who, when you do live in an area like that, or a blizzard's coming. I think for a lot of people, you think about the things like quickly, what are some of the things I need to do to be prepared? How do I keep the lights on, and how do I keep my pipes from freezing? What you don't necessarily first think about is what am I going to do when I can't leave my house and go to the pharmacy, or an ambulance can't come to my door, or that you're cut off from modern day healthcare, even if it's only for 2, 3, or 4 days. And so those are reminders. It's like, it's a weather event. Well, we've seen it enough times to enough different people that a little weather event like that, when things go a little bit sideways, the difference between life and death might just be one of these medications. And so from there all the way up to the things like you were just talking about, and as far as being kept up at night, for me, I've seen firsthand. I was working in the Maui wildfires. I also went to California for the Palisades fires, and I've seen firsthand how quickly a natural disaster or a disaster that's really concentrated in maybe one relatively small region, how quickly things can just disintegrate. The system gets overwhelmed, and tensions rise, stress is high. All of a sudden, things just fall apart. And I've seen it happen quickly in areas where it's just nothing that you would have really thought about. Who would have thought that the town of Lahaina was going to burn down, in a matter of hours? So those are things that I guess you never know what it might be. And I don't necessarily live in fear, like, looking around, when's the next tsunami coming? When's the next wildfire coming? I live in Hawaii now.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen repeated patterns. I've seen what things make a difference. And I would say for me, it's communication is I'm on here as the doctor talking about medicine, but communication is probably my number one on that list of what makes a real difference.
Yeah.
I've been in the thick of it. So I've got like 3 or 4 different redundant communications when it comes to satellite internet, fiber optic internet, sat phones, radios. Communication is key. And then right after that, you better believe that I'm fully prepared from a medical standpoint. And because the other things, at least when it comes to the things that I've experienced, these regional disasters, for the most part, food, water, those things came in by the truckloads, flown in from all over the world. Everyone was able to donate their clothes and diapers and hygienic products. All this stuff, help was pretty quick. But you can't generalize your healthcare. To some degree, you can do a little bit of that, but for the most part, it's an individual thing, and so you can't send pallets of whatever the medication is because it's so individualized. And so that's something that I encourage people, like you've got to do that for yourself. You've got to take the time to do that inventory on what you need and what your family needs and get that taken care of. And so now, I'm with you on these. It's been a few weeks now. I'd say maybe actually a couple of months that we've started to see a lot of this chatter. And then just recently, internally through some unofficial points of contact, where it's basically we've been told like this is real. We really feel like it's when, not if, and we're talking specifically about hospitals, level 1 trauma centers in mid-sized towns across the country. Things that enough that and I like I said, it doesn't take much to bring the system down, at least temporarily. That's something that I'm legitimately concerned about, and have looking around in my area, like, okay, if that were to be my town, if I'm on the list, how am I going to deal with that? What can we do? If I can't stop it when it happens, how am I going to respond? So that's where we're at today.
Yeah. I was seeing similar things, mid-town threats, unofficial, that had trauma centers but didn't have backup trauma centers. And so, they knew if they were able to take the main one down in a town of 300,000 people.
Wreak havoc. It would be, it'd be bad.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate what you've done and what you've built. And I think with Mountain Tough, the way that we want our community to be prepared for everything. And, for years that's been, are you physically ready to pull your family out of a car if you roll over in a vehicle accident on the way home? Are you mentally ready to handle the stress of a very traumatic situation? Are you spiritually ready? Are you nutritionally ready? That's what we've been, spending 9 years with our community on, is just making sure that they're well-rounded, ready to handle anything, that can come their way. And then we talked to them a lot about staying dangerous. Staying dangerous was one of our, our shirts and our stickers and our hats. It's been one of our taglines, and staying dangerous for the Mountain Tough community has always been around how can you continue to be dangerous for good. And so someone might be an amazing All-American wrestler when they're younger, and the guy that stays dangerous is the one that, then passes down that wrestling coach career to the younger generation and becomes a powerful trajectory changer in their community because, they passed that down.
Yeah.
And I think, what you're doing here is a way to be dangerous for good. And I think, being dangerous for good is something that we all want in our heart. It's all, especially I believe as men, it's all something that we're striving for, that we're looking for, that we want to do. There's a part of our DNA that is a protector, and we're definitely called to protect our immediate family, our wives and our children. But it's more than that. It's like we also are called to be there for our neighbors, and our neighbors, after the immediate family, is those around us and our community. And from a medical standpoint, you've opened up a door for us to do that in a very efficient way, where 20 years ago it would have been a different story.
We are seeing it firsthand in those disaster areas. Like, we are our brother's keeper. The communities are the reason that these things don't turn into even bigger tragedies. I mean, you are the first responder to your neighbor and to your community, and you will be when these things happen. And so, our shirt is ready for anything. So that tagline, and so I love that. Stay dangerous. I mean, I guess we're a little softer around the edges, but that is, you're absolutely right. It's also part of this mission. It's why when I say, like, hey, I hear that these other people are providing these kits and stuff. That's great. That's great. Because when this stuff happens, not if, but when it happens, you're going to be, either you, because you're ready, are going to be the one helping others, or you're going to be dependent on someone else who did listen, hopefully. So that's why I'm here. It's why we're here, getting the word out. We're 100% in line with everything you guys are doing. You've spent all this money to get your food storage and your guns and your ammo, but are you medically prepared? Let us help you out.
I love it. Well, I do know we're out of time, Shawn, but I really appreciate you, jumping on the show today, and appreciate your wisdom and guidance, and thanks so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for the platform. Congrats on all you guys have done, and we're excited to work together.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
What a great conversation with Shawn. As you know, Mountain Tough's been talking a lot of the same always ready, stay ready, be ready philosophy since the beginning, since we founded in 2016. It is new for us to think about this medical angle, and the golden nugget for sure is that conversation that Shawn got into around China, and thinking about all those APIs, that active pharmaceutical ingredient, and everything we use is coming out of Chinese factories. So we're in good shape right now, but that does have a lot of leverage for downstream problems. And if we're not prepared at our home, in our kit, on the mountain, in our truck for any of those shortages when it comes to life-saving medical pharmaceuticals, we might be in a pinch. So think about that. Think about your household, what you might want to do to clean that up. Thanks for being here. Thanks so much for diving in week after week. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.